Halloween has always been my favorite holiday. I grew up in a small town where everyone decorated their houses and kids roamed the streets late into the night. It was always harmless fun, until the year it wasn't. I was 17, too old to trick or treat, but not too old to hang out with my friends. That night, we decided to walk around and soak in the atmosphere. The air was crisp, the streets filled with glowing jack-o'-lanterns, and little kids in costumes darted past us. Everything felt normal, until we noticed the man in the mask. He was standing across the street, dressed in black with an old, cracked pumpkin mask covering his face. At first, we laughed it off, assuming it was just some guy trying to be creepy. But as we moved down the block, he followed. Not close, but always there, just far enough to make us uneasy. We tried to shrug it off. People dressed up all the time on Halloween. But the longer we walked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just some harmless prank. He wasn't with anyone. He wasn't carrying candy. He was just watching us. At one point, we turned a corner, and he was gone. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Because when we passed by a row of hedges, he stepped out, blocking our path. None of us said a word. We just froze. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, breathing through that mask. Finally, my friend Mark shouted, "Nice costume, dude," trying to play it off. But the man tilted his head slowly, like he was studying us. Then, without warning, he turned and walked away. We decided to head home after that. Nerves rattled. The streets were thinning out, decorations flickering in the dark. When I finally reached my house, I felt safer. I waved goodbye to my friends and went inside. But later that night, sometime around 2 a.m., I heard something. A scraping sound against my bedroom window. I pulled back the curtain and my blood ran cold. He was there, the man in the pumpkin mask, standing in my yard, staring up at me. I froze, not knowing what to do. My parents were asleep down the hall. I didn't want to wake them if this was some sick prank. I just stood there staring back. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and tapped the mask with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. I stumbled back, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. But when the dispatcher answered and I turned back to the window, he was gone. The police arrived within minutes, but they found nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone. Just an empty yard. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house put me on edge. By morning, I tried to convince myself it had been my imagination, that maybe I was overtired, maybe I had dreamt it. But when I walked outside, I saw something that made my stomach drop. On my front porch was a pumpkin. I hadn't carved one that year, but there it sat, fresh, uncut, with a single word scratched into the skin. Soon. After that night, I couldn't celebrate Halloween the same way again. I stopped going out, stopped handing out candy. I spent every October dreading the end of the month. I never saw the man in the mask again, but sometimes, late on Halloween night, I swear I hear it. That faint sound against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. And I wonder, is he still out there, waiting for me to open the window? Halloween, 2012. I was a senior in high school, and instead of trick-or-treating, my friends and I thought it would be fun to scare ourselves. Every town has its local legend, and ours was an abandoned cornfield on the outskirts of town. The story was that a farmer had died there on Halloween night back in the 70s, and if you went out into the field after midnight, you'd hear footsteps behind you, even if you were alone. Most people laughed it off, but of course we wanted to test it. There were 4 of us. We parked at the edge of the road, the field stretching out into the dark. The stalks were dead and brittle, the kind that rattled in the wind. We only had 2 flashlights, and the batteries in mine were already weak. We joked and laughed at first, trying to act tough, but the deeper we went, the quieter it got. The sound of cars faded, even the crickets stopped. All I could hear was the crunch of our footsteps on the dry ground. At one point, I thought I heard a second set of footsteps just behind me, heavier than ours. But when I spun around, no one was there. My friends laughed when I told them, but their laughter didn't last long. We made it to the center of the field, where there was an old scarecrow tied to a wooden pole. Its clothes were shredded, its head half gone. Someone whispered, "This is where he died." That's when the air went still. No breeze, no sound, just dead silence. And then we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, circling us. We spun our flashlights around, but the beams only lit walls of corn. Nothing moved. But the footsteps kept coming, crunching against the dirt, closer and closer, like something was pacing around us. "Stop messing around," one of my friends whispered, her voice shaking. But none of us were moving. Then came a low groan. Not human, not animal. Something in between. My flashlight flickered out. The others screamed, their lights whipping back and forth. For a split second, one of the beams caught something. Tall, hunched, moving between the stalks. We ran. The corn tore at our arms and legs as we shoved through it. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear it. Footsteps pounding the ground behind us, faster now. When we finally burst out onto the road, we collapsed near the car, gasping for air. But the sound didn't follow. It stopped the moment we left the field. We swore we wouldn't talk about it, that maybe it was just our imaginations. But when we looked at each other under the streetlight, every one of us was pale, shaking, and wide-eyed. We all heard the same thing. We all saw that shape. The scariest part came later. A week after Halloween, I went back during the day, just to prove to myself it was nothing. The scarecrow in the middle of the field was gone, and tied to the pole instead was a fresh pumpkin, carved with a jagged grin. That was the last time I ever went near that field. Even now, every Halloween, I stay inside, because I know if I go out there again, I might hear those footsteps. And this time, whatever was pacing us that night might not let us run. Halloween has always been my favorite night of the year. I grew up trick-or-treating, going to haunted houses, and later, throwing parties with friends. But after what happened in 2017, Halloween carries a completely different meaning for me. It's the night that made me realize sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or legends. They're real people. I was 22 at the time, living in a small rental house off a quiet street. I wasn't planning on going out that night, so I bought a few bags of candy, set out some decorations, and figured I'd enjoy watching horror movies between handing out treats. By 9 p.m., the trick-or-treaters had thinned out. Most families had gone home, and only a few groups of teenagers were left wandering around. I turned off the porch light, the universal signal that candy time was over. I locked the door and settled on the couch. About 20 minutes later, I heard it. 3 knocks at the front door. I froze. My light was off. Nobody should have been knocking. I waited, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Then came the knocks again, louder this time. I crept to the peephole. At first, I didn't see anyone. Then I noticed a man standing just beyond the glow of the street lamp. He wasn't dressed like a trick-or-treater. No costume. Just a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, his face shadowed. I didn't open the door. Instead, I whispered to myself, probably some late-night prank. But then he stepped closer, slowly, until he was right at my doorstep. He tilted his head, as if listening. Then, without knocking, he tried the doorknob. It rattled violently. My heart raced. I backed away from the door, every nerve screaming at me not to make a sound. The rattling stopped. Silence filled the house. That's when I heard footsteps crunching along the side of my house. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I owned, my hands shaking. From the back window, I caught sight of him. He was circling the house, running his hand along the siding, dragging it across the wood. A slow scraping sound that made my stomach twist. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator told me to stay on the line and keep quiet. The police were on their way. While I was whispering to her, I heard tapping on the glass. I turned toward my living room window, and there he was. His face pressed against the glass, staring in. He wasn't wearing a mask. His face was pale, almost gray under the porch light. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He smiled. I dropped to the floor, knife still in my hand, phone pressed to my ear. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay calm, that officers were just a few minutes away. But when I peeked back, he was gone. The house fell silent again. Then came the sound of the back door handle jiggling. It turned, shook, slammed. I swear it felt like the whole door might give way. I was crying by then, whispering frantically into the phone. And then, silence again. The next sound I heard was the sudden blast of sirens. Red and blue lights filled the street outside. 2 police officers banged on my door, shouting for me to open up. When I did, I collapsed into their arms. They searched the entire property, backyard, alley, side streets. But he was gone, vanished. The police told me it was probably someone on drugs, or maybe a burglar who thought I wasn't home. But I know what I saw. The way he stared through the glass. The way he smiled. He wasn't trying to steal anything. He was trying to get inside. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made me jump. On Halloween nights since, I refuse to hand out candy. I keep every light off, every window locked, and I never, ever answer the door. Because I can't shake the feeling that he was testing me that night. Testing to see if I'd unlock the door. Testing to see how far he could go. And if the police hadn't shown up when they did, I don't even want to imagine what would have happened. So when people ask why I don't celebrate Halloween anymore, I tell them the truth. Because Halloween isn't just about costumes and candy. It's the one night when people wear masks, and some of them never take them off.